Have you ever wondered how close you've come to danger without even realizing it? At Shivering Vault, we take you there, one story at a time. But before you drift off, consider liking this video, commenting where you're watching from and at what time, and subscribing to keep these chilling stories coming. Now, let's dive into these unsettling tales. I had just moved into my first house. I'm in my late 20s, single, working a decent job that finally let me leave my old apartment and buy a place of my own. I wanted something quiet, stable, away from the constant noise of the city. After months of searching, I found this one-story house in a California suburb. It wasn't huge, but it felt like a dream come true. Clean street, trimmed lawns, older couples walking dogs in the evenings, exactly the kind of neighborhood where you assume nothing bad ever happens. The first week was a blur of unpacking. Boxes everywhere, furniture still half assembled, me eating takeout on the floor because my table hadn't even been put together yet. I was exhausted, but happy, you know? It finally felt like my life was coming together. On my 6th night there, I was in the living room late, trying to hook up my TV. I had wires and remotes scattered around, sitting cross-legged on the carpet with YouTube tutorials playing on my phone. Out of nowhere, the doorbell rang. I froze. It was around 9:30 p.m. I didn't know anybody in the neighborhood yet, and I wasn't expecting anyone. For a second, I just sat there staring at the front door. Then I stood up, walked over and opened it. Nobody was there. Just the porch light casting that pale yellow glow on my empty driveway and the still street outside. I leaned out a little, looked both ways. Nothing. No kids running off, no cars pulling away, just silence. At first I laughed under my breath. Must have been some kids playing ding-dong ditch. Annoying but harmless. I shut the door, locked it, and went back to the mess of wires. 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang again. This time my stomach tightened a little. I got up slower, went to the door, and opened it again. Same thing, nobody there. The night air was cool, the street dead quiet. I stood there longer, scanning the yards and shadows, but nothing moved. By the third ring, it stopped being funny. It wasn't just a harmless prank anymore. It felt deliberate, like somebody was messing with me on purpose. I didn't go outside that time. I just stood behind the door, peeking through the little peephole, waiting. I couldn't see anyone. I tried to brush it off, told myself to stop being paranoid. Went back to my TV setup, though my hands were a little shaky. Every small sound in the house, the fridge clicking on, the wood creaking, made me tense up. That's when the doorknob rattled. Not gently either. Someone grabbed it hard, twisted it, shook it like they were testing how secure the lock was. The sound of metal straining against the frame made my chest tighten instantly. My whole body went cold. I just stood there, staring at the knob, half expecting it to turn all the way and the door to swing open. After a few seconds, it stopped. Silence again. I backed away slowly, heart pounding so loud it felt like it filled the room. I was still frozen in place when the garage motion light flicked on. I nearly jumped out of my skin. My garage is attached to the house with a little side door that leads into the backyard. I knew nobody should be out there. My car was parked in the driveway, so there was no reason for that light to trigger. I forced myself to creep toward the front window, the one that overlooks the driveway and part of the garage. My plan was just to peek, see if maybe a cat or raccoon had set it off. I pulled the curtain back a tiny bit. That's when something slammed against the glass right in front of my face. A violent, deliberate bang that rattled the pane. I stumbled backward so fast I nearly fell. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my phone on the carpet. I didn't see a face, didn't see details, just the sudden shock of impact and the clear message. Someone was right there, inches away from me. That was the moment I called 911. I crouched in the hallway with the phone pressed against my ear, whispering to the operator. I tried to explain what was happening, that someone was outside my house trying to get in. My voice was shaking so hard I could barely form words. She told me to stay on the line, stay low, stay quiet, and that officers were on their way. While I waited, the doorbell rang again. It echoed through the house, sharper this time, like whoever pressed it leaned on the button. Then I heard quick footsteps running across the yard, moving fast. My whole body locked up. I remember holding my breath, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles hurt, listening to those footsteps fade into the dark. The next few minutes felt like hours. Every creak of the house, every sound outside had me convinced someone was about to break in. I kept thinking about the doorknob shaking, the bang on the window, the light in the garage. I knew this wasn't just some prank anymore. Someone was trying to get me to open the door. Finally, red and blue lights flashed through my front window. The relief I felt when I saw the patrol car pull up nearly brought me to tears. 2 officers came to the door, announced themselves, and I let them in. They swept the area around my house, flashlights cutting through the shadows. After about 10 minutes, one of them came back and told me they'd found 2 men hiding behind a neighbor's fence down the street. Apparently, these guys had been targeting houses in the area. Their method was simple, but terrifying. One would keep the homeowner busy at the front door, ringing the bell, rattling the knob, trying to draw them out, while the other circled around back, looking for a way in through the garage or a window. If the door opened, they'd rush in. If it didn't, they'd keep pushing until either the person panicked and slipped up, or they found another entry point. The officers told me flat out that my quick call probably stopped them from breaking into my house. If I had gone outside to check after the first ring, or if I had ignored the rattling at the door and walked away, things could have gone a lot worse. I thanked the cops, though even as they left, I felt this heavy weight settle over me. The house, which had felt like my safe new beginning just days before, suddenly felt like a trap. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in my hallway with every light in the house on, just waiting for the morning. It's been months now, and I still double-check every lock before bed. I bought security cameras, extra deadbolts, even a new alarm system. My friends tease me about being paranoid, but I don't care, because once you've heard your doorknob rattle in the dead of night, once you've felt the vibration of someone slamming against your window, you can't ever look at your safe neighborhood the same way again. I recently moved into my first house about 3 months ago. It's in a suburb in California, nothing crazy fancy, just a little 1-story place with a small yard and a garage. For me, though, it felt like a huge milestone. I'm in my late 20s, been working like crazy, saving up for years, and finally being able to sign the papers and say, "This is my house," was a big deal. The neighborhood seemed pretty normal when I first checked it out, families with kids riding bikes, people walking their dogs, cars parked in the driveways. It's not a gated community or anything, but it felt safe, quiet. That's actually what drew me in, because I've lived in apartments for years where you hear your neighbors fighting through the walls, or people stomping upstairs, or music blasting in the middle of the night. I thought this would finally give me some peace. I was still in the middle of settling in, boxes everywhere, furniture not fully arranged, still figuring out where to put things. The first few weeks, every night after work, I'd just come home and unpack a little more. That night, I remember it was around 9:30 or so, maybe closer to 10. I was in the living room messing with the curtains, trying to see how they'd look over the big front window. That's when I heard it. A knock on the door. It wasn't loud or urgent, but it was enough to make me freeze, because I wasn't expecting anyone. I didn't really know anyone in the neighborhood yet. For a second, I just stood there like, did I actually hear that? But then it came again. I walked to the door, trying not to make too much noise, and peeked through the peephole. There was a man standing there. He looked rough. Not homeless exactly, but his clothes were kind of dirty and worn, and he had this scruffy beard. He wasn't old, maybe late 30s or early 40s. He was just standing there on my porch. I hesitated, but then cracked the door open a little, keeping the chain on. "Yeah?" I asked. He leaned a bit closer, and in this casual voice he goes, "Do the old owners still live here?" It threw me off. I didn't know how to answer right away. I just kind of shook my head and said, "No, I just moved in a couple weeks ago." He nodded slowly, like he was thinking about something, and without another word, he turned and walked off down the street. I shut the door immediately and locked it. The whole thing was weird, but I tried to tell myself maybe he was just some old friend or someone who didn't know the house had sold. Still, something about the way he looked at me didn't sit right. I double-checked the locks on the front door, then went to the sliding glass door in the back and made sure that was locked too. After that, I tried to brush it off, told myself not to overthink it, and went back to unpacking boxes in the hallway. But that man's face stuck in my head, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the house suddenly didn't feel as safe as it had earlier that day. After that weird knock, I tried to push it out of my head. I remember thinking, don't make a big deal out of it. People knock on doors all the time. By the time I was done moving a couple of boxes around, it was close to midnight. The neighborhood was dead quiet. I had the TV on low just for some background noise because it was honestly too quiet. Then I heard something. At first, I thought it was just the TV, but when I muted it, I could still hear it. It was faint, like footsteps on gravel. I walked to the front window, trying not to make it obvious, and pulled the curtain back just a little. That's when I saw it. A flashlight beam swept across my front yard. Then another. 2 different lights, moving separately. I leaned closer to the window, my stomach just dropping. There were 2 men outside. One was near the driveway, pointing his flashlight along the side of the house. The other was closer to the fence, moving toward the backyard. I ducked down fast so they couldn't see me through the window. My hands were shaking as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The dispatcher answered, calm and steady, asking what the emergency was. I tried to whisper, but my voice kept cracking. I told her there were men outside my house with flashlights walking around, and I thought they were trying to break in. She told me to stay on the line, stay somewhere safe inside the house, and that officers were on their way. While I was talking to her, I heard it. This sharp thud, like someone banging against the back of the house. I crept toward the hallway that leads to the sliding glass door, staying low, and when I peeked, my heart almost stopped. One of the men was right there at the glass. His flashlight was in one hand, and with the other he was pushing at the handle, testing it. His face was pressed close, like he was trying to see inside. I froze, barely breathing. The dispatcher kept asking me what was happening, and I whispered that one of them was at my back door trying to get in. The man tugged at the door a couple more times, then looked over his shoulder like he was checking for his partner. I could see his face clearly in the light from inside my living room. Rough skin, scruffy beard, same guy who knocked earlier. My whole body was shaking. I backed away slowly, trying not to make any sound, and crouched in the hallway closet. I could still hear faint crunching noises outside, like the other guy was moving along the fence. The dispatcher was telling me help was close, but every second felt like forever. I kept thinking, they're going to get in. Any second now, they're going to smash the glass or kick in a door and I'll be trapped. Then, just when I felt like I couldn't take it anymore, I saw flashing red and blue lights bounce across the walls. My heart almost leapt out of my chest in relief. Through the little crack in the curtain, I saw the 2 men scatter. One bolted down the street and the other tried to cut through my neighbor's yard. The police cars pulled up fast and officers jumped out, chasing after them. I didn't move from the closet until I heard a loud knock on my door and a voice calling, "Police, you can come out now." I stepped out, legs shaking so bad I could barely walk, and unlocked the door for them. One of the officers told me they caught one of the guys a couple streets over. The other got away, but at least they'd stopped whatever was about to happen. Once things settled a little, one of the officers stayed with me while the others searched the area. I was still shaking, clutching my phone like it was the only thing keeping me steady. The cop explained what had probably happened. He said there's been a crew in the area targeting houses that just sold. They'd pretend to be looking for the old owners, knock first to see if anyone answered, then come back later assuming the place was empty or lightly occupied. Hearing that made my stomach drop. The officer told me I'd done the right thing by locking up and calling right away. He even said a lot of people wouldn't have reacted as quickly, and that probably saved me from something worse. Earlier this year, I bought my first house. I'd been saving for years, cutting corners, living in small apartments, skipping vacations, just grinding toward this one goal. Finally, I found a little place in a quiet California suburb. One story, small yard, nothing extravagant, but to me it was everything I'd been dreaming about. The neighborhood seemed perfect too. The first week I moved in, I noticed how different the nights felt compared to the city. No constant traffic, no loud arguments outside, no sirens. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you want to sit on your porch barefoot with a drink and just soak it all in. That's exactly what I did most evenings. I'd sit out there, lean against the rail, and just breathe. The summer nights were warm, but not stifling, and the stillness felt like a reward for all those years of saving and sacrificing. One night, though, about 2 weeks after moving in, the quiet felt different. I was standing outside around 9:30 p.m., glass of water in hand, toes pressed against the cool wood of the porch. The street looked almost staged, like a postcard. A street lamp buzzed faintly at the corner, and not a single car had driven past in nearly an hour. Then I heard it, a faint whistle. It wasn't random, like someone absent-mindedly whistling a tune. It was deliberate, slow. A few notes, then a pause. It came from the line of trees that marked the edge of my backyard. I froze. My first thought was that it had to be a neighbor, someone walking their dog or cutting across the back trail, but something about it didn't feel casual. It didn't move closer or farther away. It was just there, floating out of the dark. I turned my head toward the trees, squinting. The yard lights didn't reach that far, so all I saw were black shapes of branches swaying slightly. The second my eyes locked on the tree line, the whistling stopped. I stood there for a while, waiting, trying to convince myself I hadn't heard what I thought I heard. Eventually, I shook it off, muttered something about weird neighbors, and went back inside. But that unease stuck with me. The night carried on as usual. I watched a couple of shows, messed around on my phone, brushed my teeth. By the time it hit midnight, I was on the couch scrolling social media, half asleep. That's when I heard it. A knock, not at the door, at the living room window, right behind where I was sitting. It was soft, but distinct. My whole body froze. I didn't even breathe. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window. The curtains were drawn, and nothing moved on the other side. I sat there for what felt like forever, straining to hear anything else. Just as I started to convince myself it was a branch, or maybe I'd imagined it, another knock came, this time from the kitchen window. I stood up, heart pounding, and walked slowly into the kitchen. The blinds were down, but I could feel the weight of the dark pressing against the glass. I didn't dare peek. Then, another knock. This time from the side window near the hallway. It felt like someone was moving around the house, tapping each window as they went. My hands were shaking when I dialed 911. I pressed the phone to my ear, whispering into it as quietly as I could. I told the dispatcher someone was outside, knocking on my windows, circling the house. She kept her voice calm, told me to stay inside, lock all the doors, and stay quiet. Officers were on their way. Then, after a while, the backyard motion light clicked on. I turned my head toward the sliding glass door, every nerve in my body screaming not to look. But I did. There was a man standing there. Tall, broad, his shoulders stiff, his body perfectly still under the harsh glow of the light. His face was shadowed, but I could see the way his head tilted upward just slightly, like he was staring straight at the house. Straight at me. My mouth went dry. My hand clenched around the phone so hard my knuckles ached. I whispered to the dispatcher that he was here, in my yard, that I could see him. He didn't move. He just stood there, head cocked, staring. The seconds stretched on like hours. I could feel my pulse in my ears. My legs were so tense I thought they'd give out. I wanted to move, to hide, but I couldn't. I just stood there locked in place, watching him through the glass. Then, finally, the distant sound of sirens broke through the night. The faint red and blue lights spilled across the street. I blinked, looked toward the front, and when I looked back, he was gone. By the time the police arrived, the yard was empty. They swept around with flashlights, checked the street, even walked the tree line at the back. Nothing. One of the officers crouched by the dirt just beyond my patio, pointing out faint shoe prints, large ones. They trailed off toward the trees and disappeared. They told me it was probably just a trespasser. Someone passing through, maybe trying to mess with me, maybe planning to break in but spooked by the fact I was home. They told me to lock my windows, install cameras if I could, and call again if anything happened. And then they left. I kept every light on and sat in the living room until sunrise. At one point, I glanced out toward the trees, and I realized something I hadn't noticed before. From where he was standing under the light, he could see directly into almost every room of my house. That thought has stuck with me more than anything else. That's it for today's tale from Shivering Vault. If you have a story worth sharing, drop it in the comments or send it our way. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your fellow thrill seekers. As always, the Shivering Vault thanks you for unlocking today's tale. Until next time, the vault awaits your return.